Welcome to Reddit After Hours. This is r/MaliciousCompliance, where OP's garbage CEO cost the company $12 million because they didn't want to pay OP. Our first Reddit post comes from StatusTap5615, titled, "Deny My Leave? We'll see who wins this game." This was a few years back when I was active duty military, officer in healthcare on the side of things. Overall, I loved my time in, but the bureaucracy of a huge organization like the military eventually wore on me. As a healthcare professional, I would often use my days off to, quote, moonlight or work in a private practice since the money is way better. This is perfectly acceptable in the military, and most providers do this actually. There's some hoops that you have to jump through though, but most commanders are fine with it. They often do it themselves. Unfortunately, people come and go, and we ended up with a first sergeant that liked to stick it to the officers whenever he could. So there was a time that I submitted leave for a day that I was supposed to work in a private practice, and he denied the day off on a technicality. I don't remember what it was. Maybe I submitted a day late or something like that, but I wasn't going to let this stop me. I quickly reviewed our sick call policy and made sure to download a copy of it. Officers were treated with quite a bit of leniency, and there was no requirement to report to work or submit a doctor's note unless you were going to be out for 3 days or more. This was what the policy stated. Also, it's important to note that this was the experience of every other officer in the unit. No one did anything more than call in sick if they were only going to miss a day. So the day that I requested off rolls around, and I unfortunately developed the sniffles and called in sick. First Sergeant was not happy, and he tells me to report to sick call and submit a doctor's note. I told him, sure, just show me the policy that says that I have to do that. We went back and forth on this all morning while I was at the private practice. He kept telling me that I needed a note. I kept telling him that I feel he's unfairly targeting me in a way that other officers have not been targeted. He finally came back with the, quote, "The commander says you need a doctor's note, so you need one." This was not something that I could argue with, at least not in the moment. In the military, if the commander says to do something, you pretty much have to do it. So, cue the malicious compliance. Due to a weird quirk, my private practice office and house is about an hour away from the base that I work at. This is, however, a base in a town where I also live in. I had previously been stationed there, but got moved down the road and didn't want to move the family, so I just decided to commute. So rather than drive all the way to base where I work, I devised a plan to go to one more local to me. By this time, it's close to lunch, and I have about an hour before my next patients arrive at the private practice. So I quickly drive to the hospital ER, and as I'm walking in, I start to convince myself how sick I feel. By the time I walk through the doors and check in, I've got a pretty good show going and tell the receptionist that I've been throwing up all morning and can't keep anything down. The nurse says, "Yeah, you don't look very good," which I'm not sure how to take actually. The provider sees me quickly and diagnoses a stomach virus, asks me why I came in for it, and I tell them that my commander made me for the note. He's irritated by that, but says that he's used to that. I'm about to be let go when he decides that since I've been throwing up all day, he should get some fluids in me and orders an IV. I glance at my watch and I have about 30 minutes left in my lunch. And with the busy morning, I hadn't kept up on my fluid intake, so I figured, why not? So they hook up the IV, and I chill on my phone for the next 20 minutes getting nice and hydrated. Unfortunately, my lunch was almost over, and the bag was only about half empty. Cut to me unhooking the bag and squeezing the remainder into the sink, hooked it back up, and the nurse comes in and sees it's empty, and I'm on my way. Doctor's note in hand, nice and hydrated, and with plenty of time to finish my schedule of patients after lunch. Good on you, OP, for getting one up on him. As someone who's also in the military, I've definitely met my fair share of ego-driven leaders that just get upset anytime they don't get their way. Like going to the commander and tattletaling on you because he didn't get his way by getting a doctor's note from you is pretty sad. Our next Reddit post comes from Prestigious Store 22, titled, "Sure, I won't wear my tank top during my workout." So a little background first. I, now 45, used to be a military driver in the Dutch Navy a long time ago, and at some point, I was stationed at a little Navy base meant for physical rehabilitation of Navy personnel. With little, I mean a base with less than a few hundred people. My function was to drive patients to the military hospital and to drive groups of people to the swimming pool and things like that. When I was at home on the weekends, I would do my workout at my regular gym. But on work days, when I finished my work, I would train in a small gym on site where I was stationed because I would stay on base during the week. I was about 21 years old and I was preparing for my very first bodybuilding contest. So I was muscular and working out a lot. At some point, the gym manager, who was a Marine sergeant, told me that someone at upper management was offended by my looks and that I was no longer allowed to wear a tank top during my workout. My tank top was wide-fitting and purely functional, and seemingly no one was ever bothered by me wearing it. At least that's what I thought. I argued with him about how unfair that I thought this was and pointed towards a fellow gym goer who was also wearing a tank top and asked the sergeant why this guy wasn't told not to wear a tank top during his workout. This man was athletic and in fair shape, but not bulky and muscular. The sergeant, who I got along with very well, agreed with me, but told me that the officers in charge ordered him to just tell me, and orders are orders. He agreed with me though, but the higher-ups already decided. So he felt that he didn't have a choice in telling me. At that point, I just took my loss and finished my workout. The next day, I found the perfect solution and took one of the shirts that we got in our Dutch physical fitness uniform, what roughly translates to personal standardized gear. This shirt was a stretchy, slim-fitted white shirt, so I decided to wear that for my next workout. When I arrived at the gym, the sergeant shook his head and told me that this was not what the officers in charge would appreciate. So I told him that this is what the Navy gave me, so it couldn't be wrong, right? My body was much more on display compared to the tank top now. The tight-fit shirt showed everything, especially when I was sweating. I was fully compliant with the dress code, though, and nobody would be able to dispute that. The sergeant laughed because he knew that I was right, but told me that the officers would probably be pissed. I kept doing my workout like this that week, and after the weekend, the sergeant told me, with a smile, that the higher-ups retracted their order and to please start wearing my tank top again. OP, you gotta love the idiocy of some of the higher-ups. However, if I were you, I would continue to wear that navy top since that was what you were issued. They can't possibly write you up for something that the Navy issued you, right? And if they had more of a problem with that, I would continue to wearing that just out of spite. Our next Reddit post comes from PartyShape557, titled, "My boss hired 2 interns to replace me and asked me to train them after they were planning to fire me. I used to work in media intelligence, which is a really nice niche market in the country that I am from. I started as an assistant and I learned everything from scratch as I switched from the hospitality industry. Pretty big step, I know, but I was eager to learn and really interested in what they do as I was trying to get into media back then. First of all, as I learned everything from scratch, I got really good at what I did after just 6 months of working there. I was in a 3-person team and I had one of the best bosses and a really good colleague, which were both veterans in the industry. Both of them helped me a lot to get to where I am then. They both left the company after just a year, and as usually happens, upper management was just plain hot garbage. The company had 4 changes in direction within a year and it was stressing my team out. They did ask me to leave with them, but with me being young and naive, I was trying to prove myself, so I declined. On to the story. After my boss and colleague left, it was just me and my team, and I was in charge of a few markets. I was asked to be on call for technical support and was not offered anything in return. At the time, I was pissed, but I was also trying to prove myself, so I obliged. I got really stressed out from working 13 hours a day for a few months, and at that point, I kept asking my manager to hire more people as I can't be working like this, and it's stressing me out. My manager went on and on saying that they don't have the budget for it, so I just forgot about it and let myself drown in work. One day, the CEO of the company came and we had dinner as he was growing close to me since I was the only person left who actually knew the ins and outs of the old and the new system that the company used. Keep in mind, the CEO is a cheapskate and will try all and every single way to suck you dry. He asked me what I wanted to change in the company during dinner, so I started off with asking for 2 new hires for my team, where he gave me the same answer as my manager, basically, so I asked him for a promotion and a raise, which he also declined, saying, "You don't have the necessary experience." So I was pissed. As a normal person would expect, after working 13 hours for months, you would need rest. I had almost 3 weeks of PTO saved, and I needed the rest. The manager threatened to fire me if I took any PTO though, as no one was able to do what I did. I took the PTO anyways, and I got well rested and was all good until I came back. There were 2 new faces, and I was pretty confused, so I asked my manager who they were, and she told me that they were my replacements. She told me that my notice was 2 months and that I had to train them before I leave. She couldn't do anything as I was the only one in the company who knew how to run the legacy and the new systems, so realistically, she couldn't say that I was not training them properly as she didn't even know how things worked. Here's the part where the malicious compliance happens. Since the manager did not know how things work, she told me to train the interns on the legacy systems to, quote, know better on how the company was built up, and I did just that. She told me strictly to just train the interns on legacy and that she will be dealing with the rest. Sure, I'll do just that. It was until my last week when stuff really hit the fan. My manager found out that I had only been giving training on the legacy system and didn't give them my notes with tips on how to run the systems that needed to be used for daily operations. My manager called in the CEO and the managing director to hold a meeting with asking me why I hadn't trained my replacements properly. I just told them that I did what my manager told me, to which the manager denied until I forwarded the CEO and the MD the email that my manager had sent me, which the call promptly ended after that. After I left the company, I was patiently waiting for the call that was bound to come. It was my manager. She demanded me to get back to work and said that firing me was just a prank, blah, 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 blah. I told them to pay me triple my wage and maybe I'll consider it. They called me crazy and ended the call. It's been 2 months since that call, and based on a good friend from another department, my manager is neck deep in the crap show now. And then we have a quick update from OP in the bottom. So I've gotten in contact with my ex-colleagues. My ex-manager is now exploring greener pastures, and the 2 interns quit after a bit. The company had to scrap the new systems where they spent a lot developing, and they had to buy out another company specializing in system development and maintenance, which cost them about $12 million to do. Guess you could have run those systems for a lot cheaper. Wink, wink. OP, it sounds like you were the only IT guy there that knew how to run the systems that controlled their daily operations. When will managers learn? You never mess with the IT guy. The IT guy can ruin a company, and it sounds like they almost ruined their own company. I don't know how you don't ruin your company when you have to buy out another company for $12 million to run a system that they could have just given you a raise to do. Like, that's absolutely absurd to me, OP. I would much rather pay someone like an extra $100,000 a year than spend freaking $12 million on buying a company. Idiots, OP. Good for you, though. I hope you found a better situation after that. Our next Reddit post comes from Rust and Dirt, simply titled Dump Truck Delivery. 20 plus years ago now, I worked at a landscaping supply business driving a dump truck. I've been a software engineer for most of the time since, but at that time, well, mistakes were made, and I spent a few years driving a truck. There was a single axle truck about 26,000 pounds gross. We often overloaded them by about a ton. Massatoch was on the edge of the area where we often delivered to, and we occasionally took rock or mulch to the high school there. I arrived one day with probably 4 or 5 tons of topsoil. If I recall correctly, I had to drive around the school and find someone. I suspect that I had been instructed on where to meet people, and those people weren't there. I asked after the name that I had on the delivery ticket, and it was written on there like I should know who they were. When I found someone behind the school and was informed that it was a math or a physics teacher, I don't recall, but something STEM related, that I was looking for. I think I asked that person if they could find the teacher for me. Eventually, I met the teacher and 3 or 4 students in front of the school. I didn't know any of them. I might have still been 19 or 20 at the time, and I looked very young. It wasn't rare to be forced to find people for a delivery, and everything was normal so far, at least. I got out of the truck and was told that the dirt was to be dumped into a planter that they had been assembling with decorative blocks around the sign from the high school. It was out maybe about 50 feet into the grass between the road and the parking lot in front of the school. I hesitated and might have managed to say the word before being interrupted. I was going to say that the truck would leave marks in the grass. The truck, is 12,000 pounds empty and was heavy enough that it would compress the dirt, and even though the grass would only be flattened, it would leave a trail anywhere the truck went, likely an inch or two deep that wouldn't go away anytime soon. The tracks would be conspicuous for sure. I don't recall if I even got one more syllable out before I was interrupted with a condescending tone, initially from the teacher and then from one or two of the students. I tried to speak again, and again I was met with a mix of disbelief that I didn't understand the instructions and further attempts to explain what they wanted me to do as if I was 5 years old or didn't speak English. I believe I attempted to speak 2 or 3 times before finally giving up. I acquiesced, got back into the truck, and proceeded to drive into the grass, leaving ruts that the groundkeepers would regret for years to come. The grass will be cut off level above these ruts, but you'll still feel them when you drive over them with a mower. I backed the truck up to one side of the planter and dumped the dirt in it until it was piled above the small semi-oval retaining wall, and I was signaled to stop. The sign was in the middle of the planter, which meant that the pile was only on one side. The other side was pretty much empty. I expected that we would want to drive to the other side of the planter. You know, when you dump enough piles of something, you get a feel for what it's going to take to fill a space, right? But after being told to stop, I got out to suggest that they would want more dirt here to fill the entire planter. Again, I was not even able to finish a sentence. I attempted to tell them that when they spread out the dirt in the planter, it wasn't going to be anywhere near the brim. I also would be willing to stay while they move some dirt over to the bare area so that we could dump more without spilling out into the grass. It was clear, though, that they didn't have any use for anything that I might have to say. The disrespect was clearly intentional. I'm not sure if there was some perceived slight or if this was just a wolf pack who they did this to everyone. I was told to go dump the remaining soil, which was probably about 2 or 3 tons left in the truck, which could have been put to good use in the planter still, out in a row crop field back behind the school. Here's another intricacy of working with a dump truck that you might not intuit. Dirt doesn't spread evenly out of a dump truck bed. Most trucks have chains from the gate that allow you to meter how quickly the material comes out of the truck. These work great with small rock and gravel. With materials that's more prone to clumping, though, you set the chains such that the gate can open wider and be less prone to clogging, but for dirt and mulch, it effectively just doesn't work. It hits the gate, compacts a bit, and it gets clogged. Then you can't release the chains because there are thousands of pounds of material pressed against it. You have to dig it out, which is a lot of work, even with gravity helping you, and of course, the whole exercise was futile from the start. Thankfully, these people didn't know to ask, or I'm sure they would have directed me to do my job, and then I would have been faced with either arguing with people who didn't care what I thought, or setting the chains and spending 10 minutes unclogging the gate of the truck. You might guess by now that there's too much nuance in that to convey in a scenario where I've yet to even be allowed to finish a sentence. We weren't having a conversation, and these people were enjoying this for some reason. This was a long time ago, and I don't remember much of what was said to me, but I do clearly remember one kid slowly explaining, just take the truck over there and drive while you dump it out, or something to that effect, with hand gestures like you would explain something to a child. By this point, I wouldn't even piss on them if they were on fire, so I wasn't inclined to expose myself for any more of this noise. I had them sign for the delivery and then drove around the school and into the field. I felt a little bit bad for whoever farmed this field, so I actually did try to make it work as well as possible. I also doubted that they had permission for me to put this here. I drove about as fast as I was willing to drive in a recently tilled field and started raising the bed. As topsoil is prone to do, nothing happened until the entire mass started sliding and essentially landed in the field in a large pile. You could tell that if you knew what you were looking at, the truck had been moving when it was dumped, but it was still a pile that someone was going to have to deal with. I drove past the school a week or so later on another delivery. I was curious to see if they had gone out to the field to get some of the nice sifted topsoil when they realized that the planter was barely half filled, or maybe to use it to patch the ruts in the grass. There was still obvious tracks leading to the newly constructed planter. The planter, though, was still half filled with dirt, leaving the back of multiple courses of block exposed, and a large pile of dirt was still standing out in the field. The planter stayed that way for years, and I don't know if anyone ever fixed it. The entire complex was apparently demolished and has been replaced with a new building now, and I moved out of the area a long time ago. I'm not entirely certain that this was malicious compliance, but I wasn't trying to be malicious. I just wasn't going to argue with people who were both insulting me and borderline hostile. I held that job for too long anyway, maybe 6 years or so. So I certainly had more bad or weird encounters with customers, like the time I guess I disappointed a couple trying to have a delivery man three-way, but this was one of the worst. OP, I will never understand why some people that go to college just automatically feel entitled or smarter than everybody else. I went to college. I have a bachelor's degree myself, actually, but I don't consider myself automatically smarter than anyone else. And I actually really go out of my way to try to be as nice and polite to everyone as I can possibly be. Sometimes I'm even overly polite because, there's just so many buttholes in the world that, I think it pays to be one of the nice ones. Anyway, OP, screw these guys. They got exactly what they, asked for. And just driving a 26,000 pound truck on grass, I'm surprised it didn't tear up everything. It sounds like you're doing really good for yourself now, though, OP, so congratulations on that. That was Reddit After Hours, bringing you r/malicious compliance. Thank you all so much for listening, and if you like these videos, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below for any future Reddit subs that you'd like to see us cover, as we post new Reddit videos almost every single day.